Let's not outsmart comprehensible input. I'm Joseph. This is Input English. Today I'd like to offer some concepts, ideas that a lot of people are going to need as they approach comprehensible input. Comprehensible input is the modern trend in language learning, and it is associated with results far superior to those obtained with traditional methods. In school, many of us studied various languages, but we did so by studying the structure of those languages. We studied the grammar, we memorized vocabulary, and we did not acquire the language. We did get good grades, we passed the courses, but at the end of the process, few students using these traditional methods in school actually develop a useful degree of proficiency with the language. Comprehensible input is not a new idea. The concept was introduced more than 50 years ago. Over those decades, we have learned a great deal about how to use comprehensible input and how not to use it. The most common advice we are given when we use comprehensible input for language learning is do not study, do not look up words, do not memorize lists of words. Based on our experience in school, advice like that seems counterintuitive. At first, it doesn't make any sense. How can you learn something if you don't study it? How can you learn something if you don't memorize? And if you don't know a word, how can you live with that fact without looking that word up? We confront these paradoxes when we embrace comprehensible input. And what I'm trying to do today is give you the tools that you can overcome this apparent conflict. The reason this is important is that if we do study, and if we do look up words, and if we do memorize, then we will derail comprehensible input and prevent it from working its magic. So that's our topic for today. First of all, what is the number one cause of failure in language learning? People quit. People give up. They give up for a variety of reasons, a lack of progress, and the way they're studying the language is not fun. It's not enjoyable. If you are doing something to learn a language and it's not fun, it's very difficult to persevere. It's very difficult to continue. So quitting is the one thing we really want to combat. So the next question is, what is the ingredient most closely associated with success with comprehensible input? The answer to that is a great deal of input. Not a little bit of input, but a great deal of input. There's no way around that. You cannot absorb a language if you're never in contact with it. People frequently ask in the comments section, how much input do I need to become fluent? How many hours do I need? How many years will it take? So let's address that. First of all, I don't want to talk about years because when you talk about years, you are not addressing how concentrated the program is. If someone does a little bit of input over a period of many years, they may not have much progress to show for that. We're much better off thinking in terms of hours in contact with the language. Then we can draw some conclusions. On this subject, we should recognize that anyone watching these videos on the Input English channel already has a lot of English, already has a degree of proficiency, because at this point I have no beginner or super beginner material to offer. This is all intermediate level content. So you're not starting from zero. One of the known determinants on how long it will take you in hours to become proficient with English is what is your starting language. If you come to English from a European language that has a lot in common with English, then it will be a shorter process. If you come to English from a non-European language, particularly if there is a different alphabet script, then it's going to take longer. How much longer? I usually think in terms of twice as long. It could be more than that. I don't have the ability to tell you how many hours in contact with English through comprehensible input it will take you to become proficient. My mental image of the answer to that question is on the order of 2,000 hours. Where I get that information was my journey in Spanish, because I started from zero, and at 1,500 hours I was not proficient, but after 2,000 hours I have a pretty good grasp of the language and can understand pretty much anything I listen to. At this point, what I trip over in Spanish is slang and local expressions, strong accents, and people speaking incredibly quickly. Everyday speech I can pretty much follow after about 2,000 hours of input. If I had already developed some facility in Spanish, that is, if I was not a beginner, it would have been less time. In general, I would think in terms of thousands of hours, not hundreds of hours. I can't change that. There are a lot of videos online that contradict that. There are a lot of videos that talk about becoming fluent in 4 months, becoming fluent in 30 days. And by now, most of us should understand that that's rubbish. It's complete nonsense. There is no quick way to develop proficiency in a language quickly. One of the reasons that comprehensible input is so counterintuitive for many of us is that it heavily involves the subconscious mind. In school, we are very much engaging our conscious mind. We focus on something, we memorize it, we study it, we repeat that study, we take quizzes, and that process puts the new knowledge into short-term memory, and if we're fortunate, it can go into long-term memory. The experience in school is very focused on the conscious mind, on very concrete ideas, and in school we shun uncertainty. With comprehensible input, if we do it right, we embrace uncertainty and we heavily engage our subconscious mind. In a previous video, I talked about the Zeigarnik effect. That is, if a person considers a task completed, they tend to forget it. But if they consider that same task incomplete, it tends to stay resident in their mind. It tends to stay active. But the key here is it tends to stay active in the subconscious mind. It becomes an unsolved problem for the subconscious mind to process. And this is one of the ways comprehensible input works. We recruit the subconscious mind to help find meanings and certainty out of what appears to be chaos, that is uncertainty. One of the problems with the subconscious mind is we don't have direct access to it with very specific control. We can nudge it along indirectly, but we don't have a control panel to get into the subconscious mind and examine what it is doing. We don't have access to that. One of the ways I view the subconscious mind is that it is always running It is in service of us and our needs, and it stands ready to help us. We can look at the subconscious mind as an assistant, a very capable assistant to the conscious mind. Our subconscious mind does a lot of work for us every day. We are constantly bombarded with information coming in through our five senses. This dazzling amount of information could be overwhelming to our conscious mind were it not for the subconscious mind. This information comes into the brain, is filtered, and presented selectively to the conscious mind. Take, for instance, your ability to read in a busy location with a lot of noise and movement around you. You can watch a video while riding on public transit. We have a great ability to filter information that is not useful to us. One of the problems with that filter is it can filter out comprehensible input. That is, if we are playing comprehensible input in the background and we're not focusing our attention on it, if we're not trying to figure out what the story means, then our subconscious mind will just classify it as noise and filter it out. We won't benefit from it. Our subconscious mind is also very much involved in retrieving information that we have learned in the past. We have all had the sensation that we know something, but we just can't remember it. It's on the tip of our tongue, but we just can't find that word or that fact. Now, this is where my wife gave me a wonderful mental image for what is going on. What she's talking about is the subconscious mind. In the past, when libraries had huge numbers of books, many of those books were kept in a storage facility called the stacks. They were upstairs. And the stacks were a great repository for information, but they were hard to access. It wasn't as easy as just going to a regular shelf and pulling out a book. So when my wife addressed this phenomenon of retrieving information that's on the tip of the tongue, something that you learned in the past but can't quite retrieve, she created this image of a little guy going up into the stacks and retrieving the data. That little guy is in our brain. That little guy is our subconscious mind. I think most of us have had the experience that we couldn't remember something and then we just put it out of our mind, quit worrying about it, moved on to some other topic, and then in a flash we remembered what we were trying to retrieve. The little guy in the stacks found the information. That little guy is your subconscious mind. So how could we outsmart comprehensible input? What is the big risk? Well, the first one we talked about, that is quitting because we're not impressed with the results. Now, the availability of that mode of failure is seen right on YouTube. There are many YouTube videos that discuss the presenter's experience with 100 hours of dreaming Spanish. And then the rest of the title is, Did it work or is it a lie? For those of us familiar with comprehensible input, it's easy to understand that a 100-hour trial of comprehensible input is completely meaningless and that video is just sensational nonsense. The other huge way that we could outsmart comprehensible input is we could fail to recognize the best methods to use comprehensible input to our advantage. I'm going to showcase one because it's easy to misunderstand and not use it. And then I will go to the 3 best ways to use comprehensible input. We should not discount stories. Story listening, story learning, reading, or listening to stories is one of the best ways to acquire a language. It requires us to embrace uncertainty because not all the words will be known to us. Luckily, with comprehensible input, not understanding is what happens just before we establish understanding. Stories give us the whole language. Stories give us the context so that as we listen to the content, we can figure out the meaning of the words that we don't yet know. When we use stories to learn language, we need to understand in general what the story is about, but we don't need to know every word. Eventually, perhaps with some repetition, we will learn those words. We will absorb the grammar, and if we are listening to this content, we will learn the pronunciation of all of the words too. The point I'm trying to make is that I selectively look for stories for my language learning. I want stories because stories are very efficient for language learning. The trouble is, as you look at story listening, you can't tell that anything's happening. You don't get a sensation minute to minute that you're learning anything. You're just listening to a silly story. Learning language with stories is a little subtle. It's easy to not understand what's happening. It requires a level of sophistication from the learner to trust the system and allow it to work its magic. If someone listens to stories for a dozen hours, they will have nothing to show for it. They won't be able to tell that they did anything. If, on the other hand, they listen to 200 or 300 hours of the same content, they will be impressed at the progress they've made. It takes that much time to see progress. So if you want to learn English, for instance, using comprehensible input, what are the 3 most powerful methods you could use to ensure your success? Well, number 1 is not available to all people. Number 1 would be a significant other who is a native speaker. Girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, you get it. A long-term relationship with a native speaker nearly ensures success. But admittedly, that's not available to all of us. Number 2 is language exchange. Regular language exchange is one of the best ways to acquire a language. You identify a language learning partner. They are fluent in your target language. Ideally, you speak a language that they are interested in. They speak to you in your target language. You speak to them in their target language. One of the advantages of this model of language exchange is that no money need change hands. I'm not talking about a tutor. I'm talking about a language learning partner whose benefit is reciprocal of yours. They learn your language while you learn their language. The trouble with language exchange is it's not easy to organize. You have to find a language learning partner, you have to find time in your busy schedule, and you have to make an effort to make these connections. This is made much easier with apps such as the Tandem app, and it is readily available to you in the 21st century using modern technology. If you want to make rapid progress in English without getting a tutor, consider language exchange. You can find the Tandem app online. So what is number 3? What is the third best way of acquiring a language? So if number 1, having a partner who's a native speaker, is not available to all of us, and if number 2, language exchange is a little cumbersome, then what's number 3? What is the third best way to acquire a language? Well, it actually may be the very best because it is not cumbersome and it is available to all of us, and that is story listening. As of this recording, the Input English channel has over 360 videos. The average length of a video on this channel is 15 minutes. Now that makes the mathematics very simple. If you watch 4 videos, on average, you have absorbed 1 hour of input. If you look at the catalog of videos that we have on the channel, a majority of them are stories. They are fictional stories, they are true stories. A lot of my discussions include stories. This is not an accident. This channel was created mindful of the fact that story listening is one of the best ways to learn language. So as you look at the content available on this channel, consider that these stories are a powerful tool for you to make progress. They're available 24 hours a day, they're available to everyone, and they are free. So at this point, I would look at your circumstances and ask yourself, are you taking adequate advantage of story listening? Is it prominently featured in the way you are trying to acquire the English language? As you probably know, I don't boss people around, but I'm sharing this concept in the honest hope that people will put a great deal of emphasis on story listening and make the progress in English that they deserve. I invite comments below, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.